Before he abruptly yanked the plug on his 2017 meetings in Davos, Switzerland, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had meetings planned with Facebook, and he wanted a roundtable meeting with foreign-funded anti-conservative meddlers at Avaaz. Yesterday, I introduced you to the massive, nearly 800-page-long access to information package we got back in relation to Trudeau's canceled trip to Davos, Switzerland to the World Economic Forum back in 2017. Trudeau canceled his trip because shortly before then, the ethics commissioner report into his vacation on a billionaire's island found him guilty of violating Canadian ethics laws. So to then rebuild the broken trust that he thought he had with Canadians, Trudeau thought he'd best spend his time out on the town hall trail, impressing us with his sharp wit and Toastmaster skills. Yesterday, I talked about how the focus of the Davos trip planning before Trudeau pulled the plug was to just have a big, huge, fancy party. At the party, Trudeau wanted Drake and The Weeknd to be his friends for the night, and he was willing to pay for it, or rather, he was willing to make us pay for that indulgence for himself. I also told you about how some of the events Justin Trudeau was invited to were very weird, including something called a refugee run, where fancy rich people pretend to walk a mile, or a few steps, I guess, in refugee shoes to make themselves feel better about their privileged situation in the world. Now, today I'm going to talk about some of the high-level meetings that were scheduled for Justin Trudeau before he canceled the trip. And some of these meetings are pretty darn creepy and sinister looking back at them through the lens of 2 years' worth of clarity and, I guess, liberal scandals. Okay, let's dive right into these documents. At page 58, we see a reference to organizing meetings with CEOs and others at Davos. Now, we can see that these meetings are quote-unquote organized by Canada. Keep that in your mind for a second, because in the very next year, 2018, we know that Finance Minister Bill Morneau was in Davos and he was meeting with snc-lavalin. How do I know? Because of an ethics commissioner report into yet another breach of Canadian ethics laws by our Prime Minister. Let's switch documents for a quick minute here and go to page 13 of the Ethics Commissioner report, labeled the Trudeau 2 report, because that's how scandalous our Prime Minister is these days. They've started numbering the reports into his illegal behaviors. It reads, the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Bill Morneau, met with Mr. Neil Bruce, CEO of snc-lavalin, on January 23, 2018 in Davos, Switzerland during the World Economic Forum. Mr. Bruce described the potential negative economic impacts if snc-lavalin were unable to reach a remediation agreement. Mr. Morneau testified that while he did not recall what was discussed, he believes the company's desire for a remediation agreement regime would have been raised with him at this time. The ethics report says that snc-lavalin asked for this meeting with Morneau, not the Canadian government. But according to these new planning documents from the year before, it looks like the normal procedure is that Canada is the party that takes the lead when organizing who the ministers are meeting with and when. And if we get to page 64, we see that before I received these documents, the federal government bureaucrats blacked out the list of companies that Trudeau has met with since the World Economic Forum held in Davos in 2016. Is snc-lavalin one of these blacked out names? I guess we'll never know. Okay, let's skip ahead to page 211. We can see Justin Trudeau was scheduled to have a 2-hour-long private dinner with someone from the Alibaba Group. And again, bureaucrats blocked out the name of this person. Alibaba is the largest Chinese virtual mall owned by Chinese billionaire Jack Ma. It's the Chinese Amazon. And it's a hub for counterfeiters that steal intellectual properties from Western companies. Now, let's skip ahead to page 366. Trudeau was supposed to do a panel with Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, and for some reason, the bureaucrats forgot to block her name out here because they blocked her name out earlier in these same access to information documents. The Prime Minister's main session in Davos would be the Congress Hall plenary session on Wednesday between 2 and 3 with the title of Positive Narrative for an Uncertain World. We would like to gather your feedback on the direction and cast as soon as possible, as the session is really anchored around the Prime Minister's participation. Currently, Meg Whitman and Sheryl Sandberg are confirmed as business representatives. We are also planning to add a global shaper and or a voice from a person who came as a refugee to Europe or North America. We have members of the refugee Olympic team in Davos and might invite one to join this panel. God, these people are so weird. They're just inserting refugees into things just for the sake of inserting refugees. It's a very weird obsession these elites have. Bureaucrats were really pressing for that meeting with Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook. And we can see why when we look at the newly released Liberal platform. Here it is. To help stop the proliferation of violent extremism online, we will move forward with new regulations for social media platforms, starting with requirements that all platforms remove illegal content, including hate speech, within 24 hours or face significant financial penalties. Now, in their platform, the Liberals don't define what hate speech is. And you and I both know that this means just like things they disagree with. Now on page 404, Avaaz is among the list of groups Trudeau wanted to hold a roundtable with, along with the Senate of Canada, Amnesty International, and Islamic Relief Worldwide, the UK branch. Now let's talk about Avaaz because we're back in election season one more time. During the last federal election campaign, United States-based Avaaz, these foreign-funded far left-wing radicals, were meddling in the Canadian election. It was real foreign interference for once. They were behind the pernicious Stop Harper campaign we saw everywhere. And Trudeau, he was insisting on a roundtable to be held with them. Now, we find out on page 507 through to 509, someone from the European Commission wanted to meet with Trudeau after the Canadian bureaucrats had invited this person to the huge Canada reception party. The name is redacted, but the email reads that this person would like to take this opportunity to request a brief meeting with the Prime Minister, either shortly before or at the margin of the reception in order to, and then they, of course, redact what the person would like to talk to the Prime Minister about. But the bureaucrats deny this EU Commission official a 2-minute head-to-head with Trudeau. And here's the reason. Not likely, given that they are not at level. At level, all the foreign interloping meddlers at Avaaz were at level with the Prime Minister, I guess. They certainly were important enough for Trudeau to desire a roundtable meeting with them. Yet an actual important person, a policymaker with the EU Commission, well, Trudeau, he just didn't have time for this so-called unimportant individual. Now, tomorrow we continue our examination of these documents. I'm going to show you how the Liberal government planned to give exclusive access to Trudeau to Canada's communist state broadcasters. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Each month, we file dozens upon dozens of access to information requests. And then we have to go through each one with a fine-tooth comb. We have to read every line because if we don't, we're going to miss something that the government is doing that you deserve to know about. But this can cost us thousands of dollars. If you can help cover the cost to assist us in asking the government questions that nobody else is, you can do that today at donations.rebelnews.com.